When I first met Adrian Cole, the world felt softer, quieter, kinder, as if life itself had decided to whisper instead of shout. He was standing outside a bookstore on a rainy afternoon, holding a white cane in one hand and a paper cup in the other. People rushed past him, umbrellas colliding like restless birds, but he stood perfectly still, face tilted slightly upward as if listening to something far away. I noticed him because he looked calm in a storm that was not just weather. "Excuse me," he said gently as I walked by. "Could you tell me if this is Maple Street?" His voice was warm, low, careful, almost musical. I stopped immediately. "Yes," I said. "Do you need help crossing?" "If you don't mind." I offered my arm. His fingers rested lightly on my sleeve, hesitant, respectful, as if afraid to inconvenience me. When we reached the other side, he thanked me like I had done something extraordinary instead of ordinary. "I'm Adrian," he said. "Lena." "Lena," he repeated, smiling in a way that made my name feel suddenly important. I should have walked away. Instead, I stayed. Adrian told me he had lost his sight in a car accident years earlier. He spoke about it without bitterness, without self-pity, only quiet acceptance. He worked remotely as a consultant, read audiobooks obsessively, and navigated the world with a grace that humbled me. We started meeting by accident, then on purpose. Coffee became dinners. Dinners became long walks where I described everything to him: the color of the sky, the expressions on strangers' faces, the way city lights reflected in puddles like scattered stars. "You make the world sound beautiful," he once said. "It is beautiful." "It is," he agreed softly. "When you're in it." No one had ever spoken to me like that before, as if my presence itself mattered. Loving Adrian felt simple. He never judged my appearance because he couldn't see it. On days when I felt exhausted or insecure, I didn't have to pretend. He loved my voice, my thoughts, the way I laughed too loudly at terrible jokes. He remembered everything I said, my favorite childhood stories, the songs I hummed unconsciously, even the exact way I took my tea. "2 sugars," he'd say, handing me a cup. "And a little milk." "How do you always remember?" "Because it's you." He listened like the world depended on it. And slowly, I depended on him too. But loving Adrian was not always easy. People stared when we walked together, not unkindly, just curiously. Some assumed I was a caretaker. Others assumed I was saintly. I wasn't either. I was just a woman who had fallen in love. My friends worried. "Are you sure he's not using you?" my best friend Mira asked once. "That's a lot of responsibility." "It doesn't feel like responsibility," I said. "It feels like partnership." And it did. Adrian insisted on independence. He cooked, worked, paid his own bills. He hated the idea of being a burden. "If I ever make your life smaller," he told me one night, "you have to tell me." "You don't," I said. "You make it bigger." He reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. Good. Years passed. 8 of them. 8 birthdays. 8 winters. 8 springs full of shared dreams. We moved into an apartment together. I described every room to him as we unpacked. "The kitchen window faces east," I said. "Morning light pours in like honey. Then that's where we'll drink coffee. And the bedroom has a tiny balcony." "Perfect," he said, "for listening to rain." Our life was quiet but full. Movie nights where I narrated the scenes. Sunday mornings filled with music, late-night conversations about everything and nothing. Sometimes I wondered what it would be like if he could see me. But then he would brush my hair away from my face, carefully, tenderly, and say, "You're beautiful when you're thinking." And I would believe him. Everything changed the day Mira dragged me to a charity gala. "You need a night out," she insisted. "Wear something stunning. Remind yourself you're still allowed to shine." I almost refused. Adrian disliked crowded events, and I hated going without him. But he encouraged me. "Go," he said. "Have fun. Tell me everything when you get back." So I went, and that's where I met Daniel Reyes, one of the most recognizable models in the country. Tall, confident, impossibly polished. People swarmed him like moths to light. He approached me because I looked lost near the balcony. "Not enjoying the party?" he asked. "Not really." "Good," he said. "Neither am I." We talked. He was surprisingly kind, funny, and disarmingly normal beneath the glamour. When I mentioned Adrian, his expression softened. "You must really love him." "I do. You talk about him like he hung the moon. Sometimes it feels like he did. Daniel smiled thoughtfully. You know, he said carefully, I do charity work with organizations for the visually impaired. If you ever need resources or support. I hesitated. Then an idea, reckless, strange, impossible, slipped into my mind. It had started as a tiny doubt months earlier. Little things. Adrian never bumped into furniture. He always turned his head toward sudden movements. Once, I caught him reaching for a dropped object before it made a sound. I dismissed it every time. Maybe he sensed vibrations. Maybe he memorized the layout. Maybe I was imagining things. But the doubt never fully disappeared. And now, standing in front of a man whose job was to be seen, the thought returned with terrifying clarity. What if Adrian wasn't blind? The idea felt like betrayal even to consider. But I needed to know. 2 weeks later, Daniel stood outside our apartment building, dressed sharply enough to stop traffic. Are you sure about this? He asked. No, I admitted. But I need answers. The plan was simple. Daniel would pretend to be a business associate looking for Adrian. If Adrian reacted visually, eye contact, recognition, anything, I would know. My hands shook as I led Daniel upstairs. Adrian was in the living room. Lena, he called. You're back early. I brought someone, I said. Daniel stepped forward. Adrian Cole? I'm Daniel Reyes. Silence. Then Adrian stood, extending his hand confidently, directly toward Daniel. Not searching. Not guessing. Direct. Daniel froze for a fraction of a second before shaking it. Nice to meet you. Adrian tilted his head slightly, as if studying his face. I feel like I've heard your voice before. My heart stopped. People often recognize Daniel's voice from interviews, but Adrian shouldn't have known his face, his presence, the exact direction he stood. Unless. Adrian turned toward me. Lena, would you mind making tea? His eyes met mine. Met them. Not vaguely. Not unfocused. Clear. Sharp. Seeing. 8 years of trust shattered in a single glance. I walked into the kitchen on trembling legs. Daniel followed quietly. He can see, he whispered. I know. My chest felt hollow, like something essential had been scooped out. When we returned, Adrian was sitting calmly, hands folded, expression unreadable. You know, he said softly. I wondered how long it would take. I stared at him. How long what would take? For you to stop believing. His words cut deeper than anger. Why? My voice cracked. Why would you do this? He exhaled slowly, as if carrying a weight he had hidden for years. Because the last person I loved cared more about my company than me. When I became CEO, suddenly everyone wanted something. I didn't know who saw me and who saw my money. Daniel shifted uncomfortably behind me. So you pretended to be blind? I said, disbelief flooding every word. Yes. For 8 years. I was going to tell you, he said quietly. I just kept waiting for the right moment. There is no right moment to reveal you built our entire relationship on a lie. Pain flickered across his face, real, raw, human. It wasn't all a lie, he said. Everything I felt was real. You were the first person who loved me without knowing what I could give you. I loved you because I trusted you, I whispered. And I trusted you with my heart, he replied. Just not with the truth. I left that night. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just quietly, like someone walking away from a burning building before the flames reached them. 4 weeks, I ignored his calls, messages, emails. Mira moved me into her spare room. I went through the motions of living without feeling anything at all. Betrayal is a strange kind of grief. You mourn not only the person, but the future you imagined with them. One evening, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Old-fashioned. Adrian always preferred tangible things. I almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it. Lena, if you never want to see me again, I will accept that. You deserved honesty from the beginning, and I failed you. Not because you weren't enough, but because I was afraid of losing you once you knew who I really was. You taught me what love looks like when it isn't transactional. You stayed when there was nothing to gain, when life was inconvenient, when loving me required patience. You gave 8 years to a man who didn't trust that he deserved them. I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know that those years were the happiest of my life. Not because you took care of me, but because you chose me every day. If you ever want closure, I will be at the bookstore on Maple Street next Saturday at noon. If not, I will understand. Adrian. Maple Street. Where we met. I told myself I wouldn't go. Saturday came anyway. And at 11:58, I found myself standing across the street from the bookstore, heart racing like it had 8 years earlier. Adrian stood exactly where he had the first day. No Cain this time. Just a man, exposed and uncertain. When he saw me, relief washed over his face so intensely it almost hurt to witness. "You came," he said. "I needed answers." He nodded. "Ask anything." I searched his eyes that had watched me for years without my knowing. "Did you ever love me?" I asked quietly, or just the idea of being loved without conditions. His expression broke. "I loved you," he said. "Completely. Terrifyingly. That's why I kept the lie, because losing you felt worse than living with guilt." Tears blurred my vision. "You didn't trust me to love the real you." I didn't trust myself to deserve it. We stood there in the same rain-soaked street where everything had begun. People rushed past, umbrellas colliding, life continuing as if nothing monumental was happening between us. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I admitted. "I know, but I also don't know how to stop loving you." Hope flickered in his eyes, fragile, cautious. "I don't expect things to go back to the way they were," he said. "If all we can have is honesty from now on, that's enough." Honesty. Simple. Ordinary. Precious. I stepped closer, close enough to hear his unsteady breathing. "No more tests," I said. "Never again. No more lies. None." I studied his face, the face I had imagined for years but never truly seen. "You're different than I pictured," I said softly. He smiled faintly. "Better or worse? Just human." Relief flooded his features. "Good. I was afraid you'd say disappointing." I shook my head. "You're many things, Adrian Cole, but not disappointing." We didn't rush back into anything. Love rebuilt slowly, carefully, like repairing something fragile with unsteady hands. But this time, it was real in a different way. Not built on illusion, not sheltered by secrets. Sometimes truth hurts. Sometimes it heals. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to face it, it gives love a second chance to grow, not as a perfect dream, but as something stronger, deeper, and infinitely more honest. As we walked away from Maple Street together, not as strangers and not quite as what we once were, Adrian reached for my hand. Not because he needed guidance, but because he wanted connection. And this time, I knew exactly what he saw when he looked at me. Not a test, not a caretaker, not an idea, just a woman who chose him, fully aware, fully awake, and finally seeing him too. And somehow, that felt like the truest love story of all.